Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Michelle, and today we're going to be sharing what I read for the month of June. So if I don't have a picture of it, I'll put it up here for you, because a lot of the books I do get from my local library, so they are due back. So the first one I'm going to talk about is one of those books. It was 2 Degrees. I'll put the picture up here. This was the book we read for both our climate change unit. We were doing it for homeschool, but also it's the book chosen for my book club at our local library. It's Adults Who Read Kids books, so young adult, middle grade, that type thing. So we chose 2 Degrees, and I really liked the book. I think it was, it made me very anxious reading it, just because it's a lot of, you don't know what's going to happen to the characters. It's a lot of cliffhangers at the end of every chapter. So it's a very fast read because you keep wanting to know what happens, but it follows the lives of 3 different children. One of them is in Alaska, I believe. One of them is in kind of the more forested mountain area, and another one is in the south somewhere because they deal with hurricanes. So you're dealing with 3 different environments. Hurricane prone areas, you're dealing with wildfires, and you're dealing with polar bears and climate change, that thing. So like I said, I did find the book, it kind of made me anxious because you don't know if the people are going to survive, don't know if the animals are going to survive. But I think the message at the end was really good. I think it really does tie it together really well and kind of empower children, especially, that they can make a difference when it comes to climate change, and that it can be very overwhelming when people talk about climate change and what's going to happen in the future, but to realize you have power in what happens in that future. And it definitely has some parts that are very realistic. It does not sugarcoat climate change at all. There's a part where the girl who's dealing with a hurricane, the entire city is flooded, and she's washed away, and then she's on top of a car trying to hang on, and in the car is someone who has died. And the same thing with the wildfire that they are going through, trying to get out of this giant forest wildfire that's surrounding them, and they come upon a car where the bodies are burnt inside. So it's very realistic. These are things that, and it even goes in the back of the book and talks about that some of these things were actually happen. There's a part where they find a horse inside a swimming pool trying to escape a fire. Those were actual physical things that happened that the author put in the book. So I do think it's very realistic, but it's also empowering to the child at the end to realize that you have a say and influence in the future. The next one is The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich. I'll put this one up. This is one my daughter, it was recommended to her by the librarian because she was kind of looking for something for Pride Month that was romance. So this was a really cute story. It was kind of more regal times, that this daughter, her father is about to die, but she can't inherit the property because she's a female, so she pretends to be a man, like an uncle or a cousin, and come in to inherit the family fortune. But of course, as acting in a man, she meets a princess, and the princess falls in love with her, and she falls in love with the princess, and they have to figure out how their relationship's going to work and what people will say. And it was just a very sweet story, so I do recommend that one. It was also a graphic novel. Next one is Queen Charlotte. So I've watched all the Bridgerton shows. Queen Charlotte was by far my favorite. I was hoping this would be give you more view into the characters, but it really didn't. I think the show was actually much better than this. And I know that I haven't read any of the other Bridgerton books that the show is based on, and I know that this was not based on a book, that this was written after the show. So that could be why that it doesn't quite have the same appeal that the show did. It was still a good story, and it did give some insights into the characters that weren't in the show, but I got far more out of the actual show. Next is some books that a homeschool mom friend gave me to read, because I've been troubleshooting some phonics issues with both my 7-year-old and my 4-year-old. She gave me Reading Reflex to read, and it's just a different approach of how to do things. And it was actually really helpful, especially for my 4-year-old, he's my only child that has seemed to have an issue understanding that letters represent sounds. And I was having trouble troubleshooting that and figuring out how to get that across to him. So that was really helpful for this. And the back does have different games. And as you can see, I copied some things here to cut off. And there's some assessments in here as well, which really helped in finding out that my 7-year-old struggles with auditory processing. So that was eye-opening, although it was kind of flagged in her MAP testing, given the different ways the test was done, this is a concern, an area that is hard or a struggle for her to address that. So I got some ideas for both the kids in this. So I did think this was really good. She also lent me Equipped for Reading Success, a comprehensive step-by-step program for developing phonetic awareness and fluent word recognition. Again, this one has a bunch of things in the back, and they're quick 1-minute activities to help with fluency. And again, this is really focusing on that auditory issue she's having. Entire first chunk of the book just breaks down all of that information for you and mapping and why it works. It's very very teacher science-based. So it's a more deeper read, but that's the kind of books I actually really like, where we get into the nitty-gritty of science and how things work and how our brain responds. So I actually really enjoyed both Reading Reflex and the Reading Success book. And the last one is, I picked this up, Learning How to Learn, a Guide for Kids and Teens. Now, I've read Barbara Oakley. She did A Mind for Numbers and Uncommon Sense Teaching. I'll link up above. I've read both those books and talked about them in a previous What I Read video. But this one is aimed for kids and teens. And this is something I want to go over with my 11-year-old in middle school. I'm not sure if we're going to do it in 7th or 8th grade, but it really hones in. It takes the concepts in those books, but presents them for an age-appropriate audience to understand them better. I was reading through the entire book, and a lot of the concepts, the diagrams, the pictures are exactly the same, but worded in a way that a child would understand them better. So we will be going over this to kind of hone in on study skills. I think that's a really important thing to teach. Especially when you get into those older years, how to study, what techniques, tools, tricks can you use to study. And it's funny because when reading the other two books and this one too, a lot of the things I naturally adapted, but I realized that not everyone is like that, and some people would benefit greatly from learning these skills right up front, opposed to struggling to naturally acquire some study skills. I think teaching study skills is really important. So that was a quick read, obviously, because I'm familiar with all of the material, but I did want to go over it and read through it myself to see how we're going to implement it in the future. So those are all the books I have read for June. If you have any recommendations, leave them in the comments below. I do enjoy nonfiction. Obviously, that's my chosen one, but I am trying to dive a little more into the romance, as you can see in here with Bridgerton. So if you have any of those type books that aren't cheesy, like Harlequin romance, that's not my drive. Leave those if you have any good recommendations for that as well, because I'd like to. That's one area I haven't really dabbled in with my reading ever. So if you have any recommendations, leave them in the comments below. If not, thank you for watching.